Hello everybody, this is another advanced English listening practice video. I say, is there anything to drink at this place? I'm absolutely parched. Today I'm talking about the British royal family. We've got some comprehension questions, and at the end of the video we'll have some excellent natural British phrases and pronunciation practice. At the time when I'm recording this video, it's the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. That means that the Queen has been the head of state for about 70 years. For exactly 70 years. So first, read through the questions, check the keywords, and make sure you understand what to listen for. If you need to, put the subtitles on. You've now got 20 seconds to look at the questions. All right, let's do this. Probably the most pressing question on your mind as you ponder the British royal family is, why does a modern European country and leading world democracy need an unelected head of state in the 21st century? Well, I'm not going to do a great job of answering that question in 5 minutes, but I'll try to give you some idea. Let's start with history. So unlike the more unfortunate royals of our European neighbours, the British and, before them, English monarchs have on many occasions shown excellent foresight and an ability to be able to tell which way the wind is blowing. Specifically, they've known when the time has come for them to let go of some of their power. This is probably most fondly remembered in Magna Carta, and you might well know what Magna Carta is. It was around about 1215, I think, that the original Magna Carta came into effect, and the probably most lasting and important part of Magna Carta basically says that everyone in the land is subject to the laws of the land, including the monarchy itself. So therefore the king is also subject to the laws of the land and cannot escape the law of the land. In addition, it also stipulated that justice must be served by the law and under the law. This meant that a baron who had a peasant doing the wrong thing couldn't just do whatever he wanted to that peasant. Although, unfortunately, in 1215, it did mean that. Basically, serfs did not have the rights of Magna Carta. What's a serf? A serf is essentially a slave. So, in the 12th and 13th century, about 85% of the population of the United Kingdom were serfs, including basically everyone's ancestors, including all of my ancestors. All of my ancestors were serfs. If your ancestors weren't serfs, you'd probably know about it, because that would mean that your ancestors would be like a baron or a lord or something like that. So all of our ancestors were slaves. So you might well think, well, that's not really all that great then, is it? But actually, it was radically progressive for the time. And if you bear in mind that the French monarchy were still desperately clinging on to absolute power 500 years later in the 17th century, which is probably why they had a really horrible and bloody revolution and were torn to shreds and had their heads cut off, and that was the end of the French monarchy, right? 500 years later, they were clinging to absolute power. That's how far ahead the British monarchy were in doing this. So they've always been this kind of very progressive force in terms of monarchy, knowing exactly when to kind of let go and move back and distribute the power in the right way. So, okay, this sort of explains why they've survived through history, but what about in the modern day? What purpose do they serve there, apart from the obvious tourist attraction? People love talking about the Queen, they love seeing the palace, they love all that kind of stuff, right? Our very existence as a nation state is based upon the premise of our monarchy. Traditionally, that was that God bestowed it upon the Queen to rule these lands, and now, these days, in the way our law works, the Queen empowers her government to rule the people. That's where the legitimacy, the supposed legitimacy of our government comes from God to the Queen to the Parliament. Now, the fact that the majority of people in the United Kingdom don't necessarily believe in, especially that specific God right now, doesn't really seem to matter anymore. As long as people still have this kind of collective fantasy that that's how it works, then technically our government has legitimacy. But what about another country that doesn't have a monarchy? What about, say, the United States? They have a piece of paper called the Constitution that gives them legitimacy, and their head of state is an elected president. So you might look at the United States and say, well, why can't Britain also have a constitution and elected president? Well, I think there is something to be said for that. And a lot of people in the UK actually do argue that that's what we should have. However, consider this. Elected presidents are notoriously unpopular. The Queen, on the other hand, has an approval rating of, have a guess? The Queen has an approval rating of over 75%. So, after 70 years in power, Queen Elizabeth II has an approval rating of 75%. The kind of approval rating which presidents, elected presidents, could only dream of. So that's well worth considering, isn't it? What's going on there? Well, I think that's going to have to be a discussion for another video. And since I am recording this around about the time of the Queen's Jubilee, I think it's well worth saying, long live Her Majesty the Queen. And in 5 seconds, you'll see the answers to the comprehension questions. Now I'm going to replay some extracts from the recording. I want you to listen to the extract, then try to say out loud the words which you hear, and then look at the written version and compare what you said to the audio and the written version. It's important to listen and try to imitate the pronunciation before you look at the written version. If you look at the written version first, it will interfere with your pronunciation practice. All right? Try that. Well, I'm not going to do a great job of Probably the most pressing question on your mind. Probably the most pressing question on your mind. If you bear in mind that there is something to be said for that. There is something to be said for that. So now you want to learn those things, right? And what you need is some personalization. I talked about this in the last video. So that means you need to take a couple of those phrases and construct 2 or 3 versions of your own from those phrases. The act of personalization is a fantastic tool that helps you to get those phrases and make them your own and encourages you to then use them when you're speaking English later. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Please go right now down to the comments and say, hey, Professor Rich, how you doing? If you think this video would be interesting to anyone you know, then send it to them and say, hey, watch this. Subscribe, share, all the rest of it. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you very much. I very much appreciate the support. And as always, I shall catch ya later. Just to finish off with my little rant, I'd have to say, well, no, I'm just rambling like a idiot.